Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'd like to call the Tuesday, March 16th, 2021 Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee to order. First item on our agenda is roll call.
We'll start the roll with Chair Brown.
Commissioner Brown voting remotely from Washington Township, Michigan.
Thank you. Commissioner Farrington.
Commissioner Farrington voting remotely from Utica, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Ha.
Commissioner Ha attending remotely, Roseville, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Kleinfeld attending remotely, East Point, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Kraft.
Commissioner Kraft attending remotely from Chesterfield Township, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Matuzak.
Commissioner Matuzak attending remotely, Clinton Township, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Nard.
Commissioner Nard attending remotely, Warren, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Romano.
Commissioner Romano, District 4, Sterling Heights, present and participating remotely in Macomb County, Michigan.
Chair Sabatini.
Commissioner Sabatini attending remotely from Macomb Township, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Van Sickle.
Commissioner Van Sickle attending remotely, Sterling Heights, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Wallace.
Commissioner Wallace attending remotely, Mount Clemens, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Song.
Commissioner Song attending remotely from Warren, Macomb County, Michigan.
Commissioner Zinner.
Commissioner Zinner attending remotely, Harrison Township, Macomb County, Michigan.
Chair, that completes the roll.
Thank you. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item is adoption of agenda. I need a motion to adopt.
Romano adopts the agenda.
Nard.
Okay.
Seconded.
Seconded by Nard. Any discussion? Please vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
Okay. Item number 4, approval of minutes, dated February 16th, 2021. Need a motion to approve.
Matuzak moves.
Second.
Matuzak. Supported by
Ha.
Ha. Okay, any discussion? Not seeing or hearing any. Please vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
Okay, next item is public participation. Public participation, this is the first opportunity for public participation. And it's for those who wish to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes on an item which is on today's agenda only. The second opportunity for public participation is for those who wish to speak on issues other than what is on today's agenda. For those planning to speak during public participation, please be advised, according to Rule 21 of the adopted board rules, personal attacks, coarse, and derogatory language and cursing will not be tolerated. Individuals using such language will be removed from the meeting. Also, those who call in by phone for public participation will be asked to speak first in an orderly fashion. Those who join virtually will be asked to type their name into the Google chat box. Those names will then be called in order in which they are received. Staff, do we have anybody in the chat box or on the phone that would like to speak?
Chair, we don't have anyone in the chat box, and I don't see or hear anyone that has called in by phone.
Okay. Public participation going once, going twice. Seeing or hearing no public participation, we'll move to item number 6, which is presentations. We have Finance Department for an office overview and also a county budget overview. I'll take these items together. Motion to receive and file, A and B.
Motion by Romano, receive and file.
Support Farrington.
Okay, made by Romano, supported by Farrington. And we have Steve Schmiegel here, our Director of Finance. Steve, I will yield the floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sabatini. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good to see everyone again. I am going to attempt to share my screen and let me know if it works. Can everybody see what looks like a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to give you a brief overview of the Finance Department. We are collectively a group of about 46 folks. We have a Finance Department, the Purchasing Department, and the Equalization Department. What you'll see on slide number 2 would be a list of key personnel in each of those areas. You'll see myself listed as the director. I've been with the county 31 years. Steve Adair is my deputy director. He has been with us for 5 years, has previous experience as treasurer, finance director in the city of Centerline, and public accounting experience prior to that. John Anderson is our risk manager. He works inside the finance department. He's been with the county 16 years. Alice Grange is our financial services manager. Think of an accounting manager, fiscal services manager role, manages the accountants and the clerks in the office. She's been with us for 7 years. Larry Lee is our purchasing manager. He's been with the county about 7 years. Kristen Seeloff is our equalization director. She's been with us for about 6 years. We are housed in finance and purchasing. We're housed in the second floor or at the second floor of the Talmer building. And the equalization department is on the 6th floor of the administration building. Purchasing also has offices and operations over at the warehouse on Hall Road and Groesbeck area, the Wirtz warehouse. I'll get to that a little bit later on. And all of the folks I just mentioned are on the call today in case we get to the end and you have specific questions about their areas of operation. You'll see that the finance department proper, if you will, has a staff of 21 and a half funded positions. We have an average years of service of just about 20. So fairly long tenure here. We have folks that have been here 30 to 35 years, a few of us. We have an administration department, that's Steve and myself, and an administrative assistant. We have fiscal services, that's Alice's group again. Your traditional accounting, clerical, processing check requests, journal entries, cash receipts, vouchers, getting ready for the audit, helping out Steve and putting the financial statements together. We have payroll, which has 2 folks in it, and those folks process the biweekly payroll, pay third-party withholdings, file W-2s and 1099s, and those sorts of things. Again, John Anderson is our risk manager. He has 1 support staff that works for him. The budget folks, there's 2 of those in my office. They are primarily involved in putting the annual budget together, processing budget adjustments, getting involved in costing out new positions if those requests come forward, those sorts of things. And then we have, I call it a systems and support service. There's 1.5 folks, and their primary duties are support for our financial accounting system. Our budget for finance for 2021 is just shy of $2.8 million. Slide 3 you'll see is it's an organizational chart of what I just went over. And move on to slide 4, a little higher level overview of the purchasing department. Again, Larry Lee is our purchasing manager. Jeff Dorowski is our assistant purchasing manager. There's 14 and a half folks in purchasing. Again, multiple operations. You have administration, again, housed here with finance on the second floor of the Talmer building. You have the warehouse staff, central receiving over at the Wirtz warehouse. The mail room is over there as well. There's 3 folks in the mail room. The print shop, there's 1 person who is just retiring. So we are short a person down to 0 actually in the print shop. 2 folks in the microfilm operation. The budget of purchasing is just shy of $2.1 million for 2021. And again, like purchase or finance, you'll see an organization chart of the purchasing department. You have the equalization department. There's a staff of 10 there. Again, they're housed on the 6th floor of the administration building. And Kristen Seeloff is the director there. Average years of service, about 7.5-ish for equalization. And I'll back up and tell you that the average tenure of the purchasing department is just over 19 years of service, very similar to us in finance. So again, slide 7 is just a real basic organization chart of the equalization department, and slide 7 is kind of, puts it all together basically as one presentation. So that's a real high level look at what we do in finance and how we're organized. You're certainly welcome to reach out to any of us at any time and ask us any kind of questions you might have, any kind of clarifications, understanding of what we do, and those sorts of things. Always welcome to reach out. I'm going to move on to slide 9 at this point and kind of get into a few slides about the budget. Again, this is the 30,000 foot view here. Our total countywide budget is about $857 million. We have 31 funds in the budget. We have the general fund, of course. We have a number of grant funds, debt service fund, mental health, so on and so forth. The general fund budget's just shy of $275 million. And there are 96 positions that are being unfunded this year. There were a number of positions that were eliminated, and those moves on the personnel side were very critical in enabling us to balance the budget for 2021. And there's a schedule later on in this slide deck that will indicate at least the number of positions and their estimated cost savings by department. The budget cycle starts just about this time of the year. We start developing fringe benefit rates internally here in my office. We then build those rates and other things into worksheets that we send out to the departments with salary schedules and prior year histories for 3 or 4 years. We then also send out what we believe to be a recommended budget. The departments then are allowed 4 or 5 weeks to digest that information. They are all then send back those same worksheets with their requested numbers. That all happens in the May-June timeframe. We then, again, digest that information that's coming back to us in the month of July. In August, we meet with the departments, talk about their requests, along with the executive's office. And then by the end of September, we compile a recommended budget that's submitted to the commissioners for debate. Those meetings happen with departments generally in the month of October. The target has been to adopt the budget in November the last couple of years. I think it's actually happened in December for various reasons. That's sort of a high level look at what we do in terms of a budget cycle. What you may or may not have noticed as you look through the budget is that we have different funds on different year ends, which may seem somewhat odd. It's been that way here for decades. The county's proper year end is December 31st. We operate on a calendar year for most funds. But again, as I said, there are several funds, mostly grant funded. Roads, for example, mental health, child care fund, front of the court, that operate on a September year end. That's aligned with the federal and state year ends relative to funding for those operations. I'll move on to slide 11. Again, this is a picture or a presentation of total dollars in the budget by fund. So you'll see the 30 funds there. And as I mentioned, the dollars previous, $857 million total budget, almost $275 million in the general fund. Slide 12 is a look at the total budget of $857 million broken down categorically between property taxes, intergovernmental, various revenue sources, and then budget categories down below: personnel, supplies, repairs, et cetera, et cetera. And what you'll notice is at the very bottom that the balance or the budget in total has an excess of expenditures over revenues of about $12.6 million. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you think about it, it doesn't mean that we're in financial crisis or hardship. Most of those excesses are in funds that have fund balance from grants. So you have the roads is a prime example where they have fund balance. They have a number of projects on the books for 2021. They're going to draw down on that money. We have other grant funds we might get for 3 years from HUD, for example, and we have 3 years to draw that money down. So that's not necessarily anything that we're concerned about or anything that's a sign of fiscal distress necessarily. Slide 13 is that same view, but of the general fund only. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that we have a surplus of just over $200,000 for 2021. And as I also mentioned earlier, that is due in very large part because of the vacant positions, or the positions, I should say, that were left unfunded for 2021. In the last slide in the deck is up on your screen now, and that shows the number of positions by department or elected official. And to the far right, you'll see an estimate of what the savings were to the general fund for those positions. And what you'll see is that there's not always a dollar for dollar correlation there, because there are general fund matches and federal funding matches where you may have a situation like the child care fund, which is funded 50% by the state and 50% by the general fund. So if you eliminate a position, the general fund savings is 50% or whatever the grant funding percentage may happen to be for that position. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, we're certainly here to answer them for you. And if we can't, we will get back with you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Commissioners, if you would like to speak, let's just use the item 6A. If you would like to speak, to just log in there. So I do see Commissioner Farrington on that list. So Commissioner. Yep.
Thank you very much, Chair. Steve, welcome. Appreciate the overview. I guess the $1 million question, or the $170 million question, is the federal stimulus money. Wondering what you know about it from a timing perspective, and what, if any, conversations have taken place as far as priorities.
What we know is that we will get the 170 million in two tranches. The first half will come within 60 days, and the other half will come a year from now. So about 85.5 million basically today, and another 85 million a year from now. We've had very preliminary discussions with the exec's office and the exec's office team about priorities. It's all relatively new. And what happened with the CARES Act money a year ago was, in my mind, somewhat similar. They came out with a big pool of money. We received it, and then there were all kind of high level, I don't want to say vague, but high level spending categories or allowable and eligible expenses. And then there were a whole host of clarifying documents that came out from Treasury about, well, now this is what we meant here and this is what we meant there and that sort of thing. But to get to answer your question directly, Commissioner, we've had preliminary discussions, but nothing overly concrete at this point. It's just too new.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, I don't see anyone else on the list I would like to speak.
Mr. Chair, there's a whole list of people.
Oh, looks like I'm in the wrong item then. I apologize. So let me go to 6A. Maybe I was in B. Oh, there we go. Commissioner Kraft.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Farrington kind of touched on everything I wanted to touch on. So, Steve, I just want to thank you for the presentation. And I guess a real broad question, since you kind of laid out a little bit of the timeline, it sounds like it's not really going to affect our budgeting timeline process. Do you see any hindrances in that going forward, that the timeline might have to shift because of these funds, or are we going to be okay?
I think we're going to be okay. I don't think it's going to change the timeline for the overall budget as we know it for the general fund and all the normal operating funds.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair Brown. Commissioner Brown.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, Steve, if we could go through and explain the revenue funds to define what each of those revenue streams represents for the new commissioners. I think that'd be helpful for them to understand where the revenue is coming from, other funds, the general fund versus all funds, just to give them an idea of the various funding streams that are coming in to fund our county.
Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, and it defaults to mute. That's probably what you're really hoping. So anyway, somehow I was taken off booted off the meeting. So I heard the very end of your question, Commissioner. So if you can repeat it, please.
Okay, sure. For the benefit of the new commissioners, could you define what each of those revenue streams represents so they know we got a general fund that represents our tax revenue, but in there's the subcategories of the other funds where those monies come from, so that they understand the various flows, because our total budget's over $800 million, but our general fund budget's 200 and some million. So explain how those things work and where they come from, just on a high level.
Yeah, typically about half of the money in the general fund comes from our property tax levy. We get another significant pool of money, somewhere upwards of $30 to $35 million from the state, either through revenue sharing or court financing or liquor tax, PPT reimbursement, judges' standard, salary reimbursement, for example. Generally speaking, I would say the primary revenue sources for the special revenue funds are generally going to be at least 50% federal money. The federal or state money, I should say. We get a lot of money from the federal government that flows through the state. But we also get some state money directly. I would say, for example, the child care fund, 50% of that is from the state of Michigan, 50% comes from the general fund. Front of the court, that's half federal revenue, half state revenue. I could go down the list, but generally speaking, most of those monies in the special revenue funds are grant monies, or at least half of it.
Okay. Another question, if you could explain them, several years ago, more than a few years ago, probably almost 10 years ago, the board bonded to fund our long-term liabilities. The city of Detroit ran into issues. They couldn't be able to fund their retiree commitments they made previously. We were going in that direction, but the board decided to bond it. Can you explain what that bonding has done in terms of putting pressure on our budget, in terms of our financial commitments going forward?
Yeah, so in 2015, we issued $263 million of 20-year bonds to fund the retiree healthcare obligation at the time. And we put those monies into a separate trust fund, and those monies are managed by a board of 5 folks. And that would be the executive or their designee, the treasurer or his or her designee, member from the chair of the board or of the commissioners or their designee, one appointee from the exec's office, which is myself, and then one member from the commissioners, the board office, which is Commissioner Hawk. And so those monies are invested almost identically to the money that is invested in the pension fund. And then we make the debt service payments. And what that's done from a budgetary standpoint is fixed our retiree healthcare costs in the general fund and all these other operating funds, because they're now responsible for paying the debt service as opposed to basically the premiums on retirees. And much as we expected, the premiums on retiree healthcare exceed the debt service payment. So the debt service is roughly about $18.1 million, maybe a little bit less because we refunded or refinanced those bonds last fall. About $1 million of that obligation is paid by Martha Teaberry every year. The other $17 million is absorbed through the various funds. So it's turned out to be a good move thus far because, again, our premiums on healthcare are a few $1 million higher than what our debt service payments are, and we're fully funding every year's required contribution, thereby elevating the funding level of the healthcare program.
Very good. So what percentage are we funded? If many people look at pension funds and say, what percentage are they funded as a gauge of health of the system? What percentage are we funded? Is it the main pension fund?
The main pension fund is just shy of 100% at the end of 2019. Of course, we don't have the actuarial results in for 2020 yet, but what we're fairly confident of is that we had a very good investment year in 2020. So our actuarial assumption is that those assets will earn 7% a year, and we're going to be upwards of 12 or 13%, we believe, in 2020. So we could likely be over 100% at the end of 2020. Can't say for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I'd say I think that's an A+ in terms of pension management, in terms of local governments being solvent with their pension funds and their long-term obligations. So that's by anybody's standards, very well performed. What's the value of the pension fund today?
A little over $1 billion.
Yeah, it's $1.3 billion, I think. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good number. Well, how much, going back to let us know, what's the cost of an employee? What's the cost of the general fund per employee? What, we look at an employee, what percent of payroll is our employee benefits that we pay out?
Mid-50s. Yeah, we have
Say again?
mid-50s, 55 to 60, depending. The average salary in the county is about 60,000. And then when you add on healthcare and, you know, pension benefits and so on and so forth. But again, remember that all employees hired in 2016 or beyond are eligible for the defined contribution plan, which over time will then lower that percentage as more and more people are in a defined contribution plan with a 6% match versus the defined benefit plan with a 10 or 11%, 12% match.
Okay. For budgeting purposes, we've changed how we've budgeted them in the past, at least for what the commissioner saw. We budget for them, not only the employee's base salary, but their fringe benefits as well. So we know the total cost of an employee when we want to look to add employees. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to bring out some of the information as background for the commissioner so they have understanding of what the flows are and going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing real quick, because this is a public document online. You have page 13, excess of expenditures over revenues, and I believe you want to have it the other way around.
Oh, good pass. Is that the general fund?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
I will correct that.
You're welcome. Okay, just two real quick things. I don't need any responses. Just wanted to let everybody know, going into budget, that yesterday's Mack County Summit meeting, some of the biggest concerns addressed were from prosecutors and sheriffs and clerks from other areas of the state will be the cost of opening up the courts and getting through all of the caseload there. And all of the departments associated with that. So I brought it up once before. We may have to evaluate that for the for the new money coming in from the federal government. However, anything and everything that we do should not be a permanent addition that would continue on year after year. So that's just for administration. Not really for us to do anything. And then the last thing is, the other thing that was discussed is, from our standpoint, what we want NACO to lobby on is that they don't change the rules over and over again through the process of giving out that money. If you remember, Steve, they would make rules, and then a month later they would change the rules, and a month later they changed the rules again the last time. And I think that counties need to know what the rules are when the money comes in, so that we know what we're doing and that the rules aren't changed in the middle of it. Thank you.
I would say to you, Commissioner Kleinfeld, that I would expect some of those back and forth changes as we go along. The actual legislation is written in such an open manner that it's left for a lot of interpretation. And I was on a webinar yesterday with the Government Finance Officers Association of America, and it's on Monday. It's an every Monday work group, basically, forum. And there were a whole list of questions, and, you know, same thing. It's going to be back and forth, back and forth. Can we fund public safety payroll again? Doesn't really say, but it was a allowable expense in the past. It will be allowable this year. Who knows? That sort of thing. So anyway, so duly noted.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kleinfeld. Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you so much, Steve, for the overview. That was really helpful. There are a lot of us who are new here and weren't part of the last budget process. So that's very helpful. This is sort of a general question and maybe more pertinent to the next item of presentation. But we'd had a big shutdown for a fairly large part of last year. And I'm wondering what effect that had on the budget in terms of the fee-for-service revenue that comes into the county. I suspect a lot of folks were not transacting business or were holding off on that. That's an assumption I'm making, and I don't know if that's true or not.
I would tell you this, Commissioner Matuzik, that depending on what fee it is, we certainly had reductions in court-based revenues, court costs and fines, those sorts of things. We also had reductions in real estate transfer tax because they're just a reduction in real estate transactions, for example, early on in the pandemic. On the flip side of that, when Treasury reduced the interest rates basically to zero, that spurred a lot of refinancing activity. So recording fee revenue is up over the prior year, for example.
All right.
On the flip side of that, there's always an inverse relationship, it seems, between the effect of interest rates on recording fees and interest income. Refinancing activity goes up, recording fee revenue goes up, but we lose on the interest earning side of things. So we have a reduction in interest earnings, for example. Just trying to think of other fee-based. Population at the jail was down to around 300 for a while. So you just approved a renewal of a contract last week for payphone commissions. Well, payphone commissions were lower in 2020 than they were in 2021. Commissary were lower. You know,
so it's all over the place.
It's all over the place. You have, you know,
okay.
It is. It's kind of all over the place in the general fund.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Haw.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to follow on Chairman Don's comments about the retirement funds. We're at $1,309,000,000, and back in November we were around 960 million. So the board restructured things, and I will be making a full report to the board shortly when we get our actuarial report in. The question I have, Steve, and thank you for the report, is you had mentioned back last year we had put some 150 positions on hold. Has there been a discussion with you and Andrew and the Marks about any plan moving forward this year with those positions?
We talked last year internally when we unfunded those positions that all of those positions would have to be discussed again going into this budget cycle. So we'll prepare the budget initially, assuming that all of those positions are still unfunded, and see where we land and see what things look like. A lot of it will depend on how property values come in. I would suspect, and that's Kristen's area of expertise, and she'll be before you next month with an equalization report to give us an idea of how much property values increased and if we have a Headley rollback and those sorts of things. But again, trying not to babble on too much, we did have discussions about every one of those positions being discussed again this year and not just building them into the budget.
Well, thank you, and your department does a fantastic job. So
thank you for the
that's all I
comments.
have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Zinner.
Thank you. Mr. Director, you mentioned about the roads, and I am asked regularly about our county roads. I realize the state is doing things with the roads. What is the expectation? What kind of money is available to work on the county roads that need help? And I mean, I just don't know. Do you have an expectation or what is available?
I don't know off the top of my head what the budget for the roads is. About $167 million for this year. Most of that money comes in from gas and weight tax, those sorts of things. I don't know what the expectation is going into fiscal year 2022 yet. I don't know what that is. And I'd have to consult with Brian Santo, the director of the roads department. Let me back up somewhat and say that we have somewhat of a decentralized accounting operation in the county. So we have my office, but health department has their own accounting staff. Mental health department has their own accounting staff. Ernest Covey at Community Action, they have their own accounting staff. It's been that way here for decades and decades. Similarly, roads has their own finance department as well. So I can check into it further if you want me to. You could also, I guess, just reach out to Brian directly. Either way.
Well, I for this year, is there enough money to do what needs to be done? Or are things being held back because of?
I'm not aware of anything being held back, but again, Brian is probably the more knowledgeable person on what's going on there. I'm not aware of anything being held back necessarily.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brown, second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What are we in a position or better position than we were 10 years ago when we had a crash in the market and the economy collapsed? I remember those days, and we had to cut 30% of our revenues and personnel around here. It was a very difficult time for us to manage that. I'm very sensitive to that going forward, and our budgets have been very flat and tight the last 3 years, basically under 2% growth from one year to the next. And that's been a good thing, and I think it's a reflection of our previous boards and the executive's office being on guard against that happening again. Could you talk about where we are in terms of the ability to have extra money to go on how much play in the budget do we have in terms of expenditures that having more luxuries than necessity? We've done a good job of funding the requirements that we're required as a county government to perform. The core service, the core functions, and we've shortened our line of services and availabilities to weather the next storm. Where are we at financially to weather another downturn like that?
I would say this to you, Commissioner. We have a balanced budget for 2021. It's about $200,000. Again, that's after we're unfunding or not funding, 100 positions. That's $6 million. Do we have fund balance where we could weather the storm? Yes, we have fund balance. 2020, again, was a surprisingly good year financially for us, and for the commissioners that continued on into this year heard me last year talking about this throughout the course of the year. Because we were saving money in utilities and operating costs and jail medical and on, with savings accruing to us as a result of COVID, surprisingly, we were able to run what will be a pretty healthy surplus. Surprisingly, we don't have the books closed yet, of course, for 2020. But we were, we'll end up with a surplus or a fund balance that will enable us to weather any kind of an economic downturn for a few years, I believe. What's interesting is, to me, that the market performed so well in 2020 when sort of my logic tells me it shouldn't have. And I think going into 2021, if you have this new, stimulus package coming out, it has money in there for infrastructure and water and sewer projects and all these sorts of things. It may spur some economic development activities that may also reflect well in the markets, surprisingly. I worry about commercial property values and what the delay will be and the impact, the delayed impact of reductions, because tenancy is going to be down, for example. And Kristen can talk more specifically about maybe the timing delay of when that might actually impact our property values. So we have to be wary about that, and just a general concern about inflation. You keep putting all this money into the economy. Again, logic tells you that at some point in time, there's got to be some inflation that sets in. Just a matter, it just hasn't happened yet. So,
I mean, one of the commissioners, I think it was Commissioner Zinner, said earlier that this CARES Act money, the money coming from Washington's one-time money, and shouldn't be used for personnel costs, because personnel costs are ongoing costs that have to be maintained for the long term. And we hate to go on a spending spree adding personnel when we have to pay for them long term after the money dries up.
And I would say this, Commissioner, that the CARES money was intended in this second round, this American Rescue Plan money, I'm sure will be the same thing, couldn't be spent on basically permanent positions. And all those dollars are meant to cover costs incurred specifically because of the pandemic. So, and I would agree with you that I would certainly think it would be not wise to add permanent positions with one-time money. It all has to be factored in.
We have serious infrastructure needs in our county that affect all the residents of the county, most residents of the county. Roads, certainly an area that was raised by a commissioner, underground infrastructure that affects us all, and the ratepayers that pay for the work that's being done there could be greatly reduced applying some of this CARES Act money to get some of those costs down and keep the costs down. It's spread over all the communities. For underground infrastructure is an area that I think we ought to be looking at seriously in terms of some of this CARES Act money to take care of some serious infrastructure issues that we have presently in our county, that not only affects us personally, protects the basements of many hundreds of thousands of residents, but also protects our lake and the water quality that's there. That's a discussion for a future day, but we've got a real opportunity here to do some serious upgrades around the county that help everyone in a collective way with this infrastructure money, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. But Steve, your department's done an outstanding job. For the commissioners who don't know, our county finance department, and not too long ago, received national awards for being the top-rated financial institutions in the county governments and public sector. How many years ago was that, Steve? I was maybe your prior finance director, Deagle, which you studied under. But the finance departments have won many awards for the job that they've done, and they've steered us through these difficult times very well. And I've got total confidence in them. And Steve been around through it all, and he's got a great deal of experience. And so you can take what he says to the bank. And so anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Steve, for coming out and giving the presentations. Good information. There's a lot of information. Certainly, you can ask more than one question at a time. It's not the only opportunity. And if you have further questions, but you can certainly ask Steve, or go through the board if you want to ask particular questions. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I comment, please?
Please, go right ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so thank you for the kind comments, Commissioner Brown. I'm proud of what we do here in this department. We've had a long history of very strong, financial management. And my predecessors, both Pete Provenzano and Dave Deagle, I wouldn't be here today without either one of those gentlemen. And for the new commissioners, there's a lot of information to digest, and I get it. And Board Chair Brown and Chair Committee Chair Sabatini, along with the Executive's Office, and I have had discussions about holding a series of like maybe 1 hour, 1 hour and a half workshops for the new commissioners preceding the upcoming 3 finance committees in April, May, and June to give you a little more insight, a little more casual setting to get to know each other and that sort of thing, that, you know, kind of where we've been, how we got to where we're at, those sorts of things. So.
Thank you for saying so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Smeagol. Learned a lot as one of the new commissioners. I wanted to go back and revisit the employee pension fund, if we could, for a minute. That's between 1 and 1.3 billion. When it's termed fully funded, does that mean that the pension fund is taking care of all the pension obligations out of the pension fund and that the county is not contributing on an annual basis to that?
No, what that means is that if the hands of time were to stop today, there would be enough money in the fund to pay the pensions of all the existing pensioners or retirees, as well as all the obligations we would owe to folks that would retire immediately. So if we just stopped doing it, we went out of business. We have a set of employees that have service credits that they've earned over their employment here. They're still employed. In theory, they would retire immediately, and all the retirees are obviously retired. We'd have enough money in the bank today to pay the projected benefits for the remainder of their expected lifetimes. So we will, in every year, as time goes along, we will have some sort of a contribution, I would expect. It could be a situation where you have no contribution because you're so overfunded, I guess, if you will. But every year, as the people in the system today earn more credits, they earn a higher pension, their wages go up, et cetera, and we will always have some sort of an obligation, I would think. Although I should say, Martha T. Berry, for example, has gotten to a point where there's so few people left in the defined benefit plan that they actually are overfunded to a degree where they're making no contribution.
So when the plan switched from the, if I have the words right, the defined benefit plan to the current contributory, is it 401 plan?
Yeah, it's a defined contribution plan.
Okay, so when that switch was done, the pension liability wasn't frozen. So as the county employees continue to have salary increases, even today, their pensions continue to rise?
Correct. For the people that were in the plan and participating as of December 31st, 2015.
Are they also getting the match in the new plan?
No. You're in one or the other, basically.
Okay. I was just thinking if they were in both, they'd be sort of double dipping, increasing their pension through. You got it. Okay, good. So do you know what the county actually had to contribute in 2020?
Oh, no, not off the top of my head.
I was looking through your presentation. I couldn't find it.
Let's see if I happen to have in 2020. I don't want to speak out of incorrectly, because there's different groups in the plan. I don't want to speak out of turn here.
Okay,
I mean, I can get it to you. I can email it to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. I don't see anyone else on the list here that would like to speak. So just kind of an update. Steve had stated in regards to what our game plan is here for the newer commissioners, and obviously the tenure commissioners, if you would like to attend. Our intention is to have a few workshops here in the upcoming months prior to either the finance committee or even the full board. So our intention was to get everyone their budget, a printed budget for today's meeting. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. You probably saw some communication from Crystal about that, but that is being printed. So everyone will be getting a printed copy of the adopted budget that Steve then will be going over, and it'll be in a casual setting. So you can ask any questions, obviously, get a full update, get an understanding of what the budget is in entirety. And then obviously as that progresses into the new budget season, you'll have that basis and understanding of, what will be going on forward. So that being said, seeing no one else, we have a motion on the floor. If everyone could please vote.
That motion passes 13-0.
Okay. Next item is 6C, which is the 2020 fourth quarter financial report. I need a motion to receive and file.
Motion by Farrington.
Support from Kraft.
Van Sickle.
Okay, we have a motion by Farrington, supported by Kraft. Steve, you have the floor again.
So I will not spend a whole lot of time on this other than kind of go over the format with everyone for the benefit of the new commissioners. This is a report that you will receive from my office on a quarterly basis. It's really broken down into 3 or 4 different reports. First, I don't know how many pages, dozens of pages, are a budget to actual report. So you'll have the adopted budget, the amended budget, year to date, quarter to date for both the current year and the prior year for all the major categories, for all broken down again by fund, and we get into expenses. There's that report. The important thing to remember for commissioners is this report's essentially prepared on a cash basis. So we don't do monthly or quarterly closes here at the county. We do projections, primarily for the general fund, but we don't do actual hard closes. So all of these amounts are on a cash basis. And again, some things may look out of kilter because we haven't closed the books yet for 2020. But rest assured that if there's anything that I know of or see that's going wrong, I always alert commissioners to those particular items. There's also a report in here on all the budget adjustments that we process in my office, whether they need board approval or don't need a board approval. And there's an indication on that report whether or not they needed board approval. There's a vacant position report, which now we've updated to indicate whether it was an unfunded position or a funded position for the year. And the last report is a high-level update on the capital plan. So that, at a high level, there's a lot of information in these reports, primarily the budget to actual. And I could spend hours going on, page by page. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and, we can get answers for you. Again, I think the takeaway from this is, even though we're not done closing the books yet, I think we're going to have a good, financial year for 2020.
Okay, Steve. Actually, I got a couple quick questions. Can you explain to the board, just so everyone has a clear understanding, just you said cash basis, what the difference is between cash basis and accrual basis, just so we don't do a close, just so everyone understands that and how that transpires into the reporting.
So cash basis is, as you might expect from the description, is all the revenues, all the expenses are based on what we've paid out in cash. And let me back up on this. The numbers will also include items we've had processed in open accounts payable but haven't yet paid. It doesn't anticipate or do any kind of an accrual, if you will, to book expected or anticipated expenses for the remainder of the year. So to say that it's cash basis, really, I misspoke. The revenues are, generally speaking, reflective of what we've actually collected. The expenses are what we've paid and or what we've processed for payment through the end of the year. There could be bills coming in that we have not yet processed, for example. If that makes, I don't know if that makes sense. We also have receivables that we probably need to book for amounts due from the state, for example, for grant reimbursements, or we get a revenue sharing payment in February that applies to collections at the state level for the last 2 months of the year. We need to do that accrual kind of a thing. So I don't know. I don't know if I helped at all.
No, that's good. Just so everyone has an understanding. So basically, it's a snapshot in time. But just so everyone understands, it's not final, and the difference between the cash and accrual basis is something that obviously there's certainly a difference between the two. Just looking at the report, Steve, really quick. The general fund balance, you're estimated, it looked like it was like 94 million general fund. And then we had, of that 94 million was like 63 million. So that's probably going to leave us, if I take the CARES Act money out, that's about 30 million in the general fund estimated. Is that about right?
No, I'm not. I'm expecting, and have been mentioned to the board previously, somewhere 12, 13 in that range. So there's probably expense accruals that need to happen. There could be, there's a number of adjustments we still need to make before the auditor start in April.
Okay. So with a fund balance at 12 approximately, how does that look compared to previous years in comparison?
I'm going to say that last year was about plus 3.3, and the year before plus 4.6. Steve Adair, shake your head. Something like that. So 4.6, 3.3 an hour at like plus 12 or 13.
Okay. And then obviously, you touched on the property tax revenue with home values, going up. That's obviously going to generate more revenue for the county. I know we'll talk about that in the future. I don't expect you to speculate on that, but obviously I know it's going to be going up. Okay, looks like we have Commissioner Brown would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding that topic, what's our current county tax rate, Steve?
4.15 maybe. It was 4.565 years ago, 10 years ago when we raised the millage, but it's been subject to Headley rollbacks for 4 or 5 years in a row, maybe now. So 4.151, I believe, but.
Okay. The will you be at the meeting when equalization comes in, or were you planning on being here for the meeting when the equalization director comes in?
Yes.
That's it, probably. Because always a question comes up: what's 1 mil equal in terms of taxable value? I mean, how much does 1 mil yield us in terms of money to our general fund?
Well, 4 mils gets us about 130 million. So 30 million. Do some.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of a procedural thing. I believe when I pay my property taxes here in Sterling Heights, they go to the city. And if I were to pay my property taxes in delinquent or late at any rate, they would go through the county. Whether when the money goes through the county instead of all going directly through the city, does that change the amount of money in any of these reports? Whether it's income or out expenses or anything, or is that just all sort of behind the scenes?
What'll happen, Commissioner Van Sickle, is that those monies won't show up in the general fund as revenue. What'll end up happening is in the summer, the general fund will then be reimbursed by what we call the Delinquent Tax Revolving Fund, which is the fund that the county has to purchase all the delinquencies from all the schools and local units, including ourselves. And so what we do is we book revenue to the extent where we calculate the entire tax levy, subtract out basically the collections and some timing differences, and then we book the difference. And it works itself out through the settlement. We call it the settlement process throughout the course of the year.
I wasn't aware there was a delinquency fund. So does that mean the various municipalities and cities all get their money directly from the delinquency fund, and then that
Yes,
fund
so
eats it?
that's happening. Yes, so that's happening around this time of the year where taxes go delinquent on February 28th, and then for the next couple of months, the treasurer's office will settle the delinquency rolls with all the locals, and then we pay money out to the locals.
Where do they get the money to float all the delinquent accounts?
They would have to, some similar to us, you'd have to have cash in the bank to float those delinquencies.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I don't see anyone else on the board that would like to speak. Steve, thank you again for the presentations, all the insight, and certainly, commissioners, if you have any questions for Steve directly, he is readily available. Please vote.
I do have a comment as well after the vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
Go ahead, Steve.
Back to the question regarding the pension contribution. For 2020, it was $14.3 million countywide.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, commissioners. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, next item on the agenda is new business. Does anyone have any new business? Okay, seeing or hearing no new business.
There is a list. There's a list. It looks like Maya is the first one on it.
Okay, it's not coming up on my screen, so I apologize when I click into new business. But Commissioner Kleinfeld, go ahead.
Commissioner Song is first, and then followed by Kleinfeld, and then Ha.
Okay, I'll let you go, Commissioner Song. Since I can't see it, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, my daughter always seems to scream and yell when it's up my turn. So my question is for Chair Brown. We're about 2 weeks away from March 31st. I was just wondering if there was any updates in regards to the Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
Chair Brown, you still on the line?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We're planning for an April 1st opening. So we're expecting that they're going to open up the restrictions to allow us to have meetings in person. However, that's subject to change at the governor's notice. There seems to be a tick in cases going up, which makes me wonder if they're going to do that. So we're prepared to do it when we're allowed to do it. And right now we're assuming that they're going to maintain course, and we'll be opening up for business together in April. Is that okay? And if there's any changes to that, I'll let you know as soon as I know it.
So we haven't heard anything about a local declaration?
No.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hall, I believe it was next, or is it Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Kleinfeld.
Okay, Kleinfeld.
I'll defer to Veronica.
Just following up on what Commissioner Song just requested, at the last meeting that we talked about it under new business, Chair Brown, we needed to find out if Executive Hackle would even be willing to consider doing one. I believe that all the vaccinations, I think everybody's going to be open up on April 5th. So if we just did one for 1 month, that would allow for everybody to get vaccinated, both vaccinations. So we were waiting to hear back from you. You were going to reach out and find that out from the county executive. And I also wanted to have a discussion about waiving the attorney-client privilege or having a closed session discussion on it, because I see something that I disagree with in the attorney opinion that we got, and I wanted to have an opportunity, and time is ticking. So these are things that we would have to put on some sort of meeting in a very short period of time. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner
Okay,
Hall.
thank you. I hear you.
Thank you, Chair. For those that didn't hear prior to the beginning of the meeting, I had my second vaccination today. The line was around the building. It was a huge amount of people there, and it still took only 45 minutes, including the 15 minutes that they ask you to sit in the waiting tent to see if there's any reaction to the shot. So once again, I just can't applaud the friendliness and the organization that's taking place over at the Macomb County Center. So thank you, Chair. And it does hurt.
Any commissioners have any new business?
Commissioner Matuzik?
Commissioner, you have the floor.
I want to follow up about the meeting in person, not meeting in person question. If we do meet in person, I understand that Chair Brown and the staff have been outfitting the meeting room and trying to make it as safe as possible. I am concerned about what provisions we're making for public participation. If the limit is 25 people, we are 13 of us plus 4 staff people, plus the various department heads and people that need to come and address us, and then any general public. Today it's fairly small. I see 25 people in the meeting. In the last few that we have had, it's been like 47. So I think we really need to take into account how we're facilitating public participation, because we certainly don't want to be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So I don't know what provisions we have taken for that. The Association of Counties says that we can have virtual public participation while we're meeting in person. They could be in a different room. I just think we really need to make that consideration so we're not violating either the Open Meetings Act or the Health Department. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Any other new business? Okay. Hearing no other new business, I'm going to move to item number 8, which is public participation. This is the second public participation. The second opportunity for public participation is for those who wish to speak on issues other than what is on today's agenda. For those planning to speak during public participation, please be advised, according to Rule 21 of the adopted board rules, personal attacks, coarse and derogatory language and cursing will not be tolerated. Individuals using such language will be removed from the meeting. Also, those who call in by phone for public participation will be asked to speak first in orderly fashion. Those who join virtually will be asked to type their name into the Google chat box. Those names will then be called in order in which they are received. Staff, I will defer here. Do we have anybody that would like to speak during public participation?
Chair, I see no one in the chat box and no one has indicated by phone that they wish to speak.
Okay. Hearing that, going once, going twice, we'll close public participation and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Romano to adjourn.
Motion by Romano,
Farrington.
supported by Farrington. Okay, thank you, commissioners. Please vote.
The motion passes 13-0.
All right, we are adjourned. Have a great rest of the day, commissioners.
Thank you.